All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. Thank you for tuning in today. Hey, every now and then, Representative Dustin Burrows likes to stop on by and say hello. And this morning, you're fired up, Chairman.
Well, Chad, thank you for having me back on. I woke up and, there was an opinion piece by the editorial board of the Avalanche Journal. And I want to start by thanking them for having this piece to give me the opportunity to come back on your show and kind of go through some of the points that I disagree with and some of the things that were left out. So while I disagree with, I think, the sentiment of the piece, I do want to thank them for putting it back in the public eye so we can have this debate in public.
Yeah, we were talking about this off the air. I think the timing of this is odd because the session is over. It seems as though people are generally happy with especially with the bill that they're really going after lawmakers on, which is keeping cities in line when it comes to property tax reform.
Oh, you mean my bill?
Yeah, and I mean people are generally happy with that, right?
Sure. I mean, the old law was, cities and counties could raise people's taxes by 24% in a 3-year period of time, and you had no opportunity to, call for a referendum voter to stop that. And I think the people of West Texas thought that was a little out of control, and they wanted to get a little more control over it. And so we lowered the rollback rate to something more in line with, I think, what almost every other state in the union has, because we recognize that, allowing people to stay in their homes and giving them protections to keep them from being taxed out of their homes is important. It's their house.
When did the legislature, because I know you've talked about this before, when did the legislature put the old rate into place?
Yeah, so this was something that was done in the late 70s, and it was originally put in place at 5%. It was raised in the early 80s to 8% because of hyperinflation, and then there's been multiple attempts with bipartisan support. Even some of the Democrats who are now saying it's a bad policy voted for it back in 2005, but I guess in the era of Trump they can no longer support anything that has bipartisan support. But this has been a popular thing, giving voters more control, that says if property tax is going to go up by more than 3.5% at the city or county level, there's going to be an automatic right for the people to vote on that increase, an opportunity for local leaders to go state their case if they need the extra money for things like public safety, for things that are necessities and not just wants. And I think that when people take a look at it and think about it, it's something that's going to be popular, and I think it's good policy.
Well, and here's why I asked you that question. The headline on this: local leaders should get first shot at addressing local issues, and they go to immediately taxes. They've had since the 80s to address this issue. The local leaders have, and to me, Chairman, that they haven't done it.
Correct. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And, we can get to some of the finer points in there, but, when we talk about, when I guess the person who's quoted to back the position the most is the most liberal mayor in all of the state of Texas, Steve Adler out of Austin, that should tell you something, where, we actually had a bill signing in front of a small business, a hamburger stand, a really great guy who I believe he said his tax bill went up 44% in a single year. I mean, people cannot do that. If you want to talk about, the Texas miracle and the economy and how good it is in providing jobs, start shutting down businesses in the oil and gas industry, or these things that some of these cities are advocating for, and then hiding behind this, political jargon of local, control. That's the way to stop it. And I think the state has a implicit duty to make sure that we keep the Texas miracle strong and going for everybody.
Yeah, I want to read a portion and get your reaction to the Lubbock Avalanche Journal editorial here. It says, on the other hand, limiting local government's ability to raise revenue, taxes, without voter approval has received a chilly reception, with many worrying about the unintended consequences, such as the impact on the public safety portion of the budget.
Chad, almost every other state has some sort of either hard revenue cap or voter approval rate in there to make sure that people are not taxed out of their homes. This is something that almost every elected person across the country thinks is completely important. And all we're saying is prioritize spending. Pay public safety out of your first dollars in. There's more than enough money. And then when you go to some of the other things, the economic development tools, the dog parks and other things, that's where you pay that last. And if you think it's worthwhile to go to the voters, go to the voters. Voters are smart. They understand the difference between needs and wants. And if it truly is a public safety issue, I bet it passes, especially here in Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah. Do you accept the premise that the legislature is conducting some type of war on cities?
Oh, you mean Steve Adler's quote?
That's what he says.
That's the Steve Adler quote that's in here. Remember,
which a lot of the mayors are following his lead, by the way.
Apparently so. I mean, this is the same mayor who I think the last 2 weeks led the charge to have local decisions that people should be able to have the right to camp and live in front of your house in a tent, and you can't stop them. That takes away your right to keep people from following and aggressively panhandling you at schools, in front of restaurants, or on the way to ATM. I mean, that is the person. That tells you everything you need to know about who Mayor Adler is and what this agenda really is all about.
Well, and to me, it's disappointing seeing mayors who are from supposedly conservative cities line up behind Steve Adler, because he does kind of lead these mayors, and the talking points that he puts out there. You and I have talked about this before with talking points that have even popped up here in Lubbock. That it's the same talking points. They're put out by the Texas Municipal League, which is quoted once again here in the AJ.
The Texas Municipal League, they describe it as which works on behalf of and advocates for local government. I mean, that is the description of who it is. They leave out the part that, it also works against taxpayers with your tax dollars and does things you really probably don't know about. But no, never mind. Yes, that is the TML talking point.
Yeah, and you see a lot of these mayors and city council people and county commissioners and, across the entire state of Texas who line up and say, the state of Texas, they're attacking us.
But let's have the debate on the actual issue, not on the 30,000-foot view and the talking point. Let's talk about whether or not cities should incorporate and have a $20 minimum wage. I don't think so. That's always been at the state level. Whether or not cities should be able to shut down the oil and gas industry, even though the state of Texas has regulated that for over 100 years. Whether or not they should force businesses to have paid sick leave, or if that's a state function. Whether or not they should be able to deny leases to businesses because they donate to places like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes or Salvation Army and then hide behind this moniker of local control. I'm all about having the debate on this, but I want to get into the specifics of what these bills are and what some of these cities are trying to do, so that people really actually know what's going on.
Yeah, I want to read this, the one of the last statements that the AJ makes in their editorial. Local officials are closer to the issues. They make their homes in the communities they serve. You still live here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All my life.
All right, just making sure. Certainly there are matters that should fall to the state, but the state should exercise restraint in addressing issues better handled at the level of government closest to the people.
Again, let's talk about the very specific issues of what cities are trying to do, which I believe would damage our economy across the state. Let's talk about mandatory minimum wages, paid sick leave. Let's talk about, denying leases against the First Amendment. Let's talk about these things with specifics and not generalities, because I promise you, I've lived here all my life. I think the people of West Texas would agree with me about what's right and wrong.
Are you surprised that this type of editorial ran here in Lubbock?
Not necessarily. We sat down, Senator Perry, Representative Fruhl, and myself sat down last week and had I think an hour and a half conversation with the Avalanche Journal about a variety of things. This did come up. I think that this was probably, within a response to, some of the things that we, talked about. Certainly, some of the very specific things that we got into weren't a part of this. But, again, I'm still grateful for the opportunity, because it allows me to come on your show today and talk about these very specific things, because I think that that's good government to have this debate and have it in the public forum.
Can you do one more segment?
Sure.
All right. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Representative Dustin Burrows here on the Chad Hasty Show, KFYO. All right. We'll have our final segment here with Representative Dustin Burrows. Got two more things I want to ask you about, Representative Burrows. And in this piece, This editorial from the AJ, which, by the way, they're owned by the same folks as the Austin American-Statesman, so maybe that's why they quoted Steve Adler. Maybe they think that he's also the mayor out here. Not quite sure. But in this piece, they write that in West Texas, local leaders kept their opinions out of public view for the most part. Hey, you think that's true?
Well, let me make this comment. This was one of the more frustrating things carrying the property tax reform bill and talking to my colleagues. You know, I would hear from representatives even across the state, and they'd say, you know, my mayors and my council members are calling me, and they're really against, you know, these taxpayer protections. And I said, okay, well, are they out there saying publicly? They said, no, they don't want to say it publicly because they know how popular it is. I said, well, hold on a second. So this is really funny, you know, that you're sitting there and having somebody call you who's elected, who doesn't want to express their views publicly because they know it's out of touch, but they want you to be against it publicly. Yeah. And, you know, I dealt with that. I probably had that conversation, you know, multiple times across, you know, representatives who represented across the entire state. And so I think there's some truth in that, in the fact they didn't want to come out, but I think it's also very revealing that if this is something that taxpayers want, they want this control, they want these protections, but yet people who are against it don't want to be publicly against it. Well, you know, what does that tell you?
Well, and I absolutely see that, but I also remember the mayor here in Lubbock. It was maybe a couple of weeks ago. We had you on the show the day after he said this, when he said that it was not good public policy, and he was talking about this particular bill. Your bill, he said, was not good public policy.
I guess to the mayor's credit, he at least came out and, you know, voiced his opinion that he was against a property tax reform bill.
Yeah. Let's see. Representative Springer, one of your friends, a friend of the show. He's going to be doing some town halls next Wednesday. I think he's doing a full day of town halls. You planning any town halls in the near future?
Yeah, I'm in the process of planning them. I've done town halls, you know, right after session during the summer months. I've done them actually during session. And kind of what I have figured out is usually during the summer, everyone's on vacation. They're wanting to spend times with you and their families, their kids. It's hot outside. And so we'll set up a bunch in September, October, coordinate those with Senator Perry. He and I have always done some in the past together throughout the district, and go around and talk about, you know, these issues, property tax reform, school finance reform, the big things, and get some feedback and start expressing, you know, what our agenda is if the voters decide to send us back down to Austin, because there is unfinished business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate you stopping by today and talking about this issue. And I'm sure we'll visit much more as the summer and the then fall continues.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate the opportunity.
Always good to see you. That's Representative Dustin Burrows here on the Chad Hasty Show. Let's fire off the break. We'll be right back.